you can be on the same wavelength at a much easier rate compared to, doing remote commentary.
Here I am with Fellow, the Challenger League caster, just recently off of a 6 Invitational qualifier broadcast in which Space Station Gaming qualified for the 6 Invitational over the likes of TSM, Mirage, and Reality TV. I guess we'll start there because, it's the obvious topic. How do you think the quals went?
I'd say fairly expected. You've got SSG where all their players are veterans. They've been around the block. I mean, we on broadcast mentioned how well Bosco has performed in the past in qualifiers similar to this. So a lot of us kind of expected, TSM, SSG being like those final contenders. You have both world champion caliber teams, and then you've got, kind of wild card picks like Mirage and RTV, where I think we also said on broadcast that Mirage is still kind of building their identity because they have new pickups. They quite literally just removed Kento and brought on Hyper, so they still had a lot to build off of. And it was kind of similar with Reality TV, where the Pro League scene is still fairly new to them as a whole because they're from Challenger League. And they dropped, I believe it was Valor, dropped. He ended up quitting on his own accord, which fair enough. And they ended up picking Rice, who had fairly similar roles to Valor, and also Packer, who was like the original catalyst of all the new pickups when they were doing like SCS, for example.
Yeah.
So a lot of different teams and a lot of different ways they like to play all just kind of bundled up into one qualifier. It was going to be a good time from the start, but you also could kind of figure out what's likely to happen.
Yeah. So, I think SSG is actually a really interesting story because they didn't just win; they played literally everyone in the qualifier to get through. Because they played Reality TV first, lost. That put them in the lower bracket, and then they had to play Mirage, and then to win the whole thing, they had to beat TSM. So they didn't just go through the bracket; they literally beat every other team to prove it. What do you think about their performance in particular? Because I think it definitely showed a lot of strength, but also definitely some weakness as well.
I think you could tell that for SSG, the element of surprise was a very big thing favoring Reality TV. Sure, you're probably scrimming them once in a while because everyone's kind of in that same tight-knit group when they're looking for scrims for any kind of game day practice. But what you can get and experience on game day is just night and day from just doing scrims. So they've never played against Reality TV in any kind of environment that hasn't been, just scrims. So you get Border, for example, where they don't know how RTV systematically plays in the early round, mid round, and end round. Funny enough, you probably knew a little bit more once you had that interview with Fett because he gave you a lot of good insight on how they like to play on that map. I think it was like the LG best of one you guys discussed.
Yeah.
So you have that lack of game day experience, so they kind of get blasted a little bit by RTV. Then they go into another best of 3, probably a little more tired, but more prepared to, play against their new competition, that being Mirage. It's very back and forth because they have not a couple of troll rounds, but they have a couple of rounds where they definitely should have won, but then somehow in a really bad position, Mirage comes back from it. I don't know as much from the Mirage match they played because that was off stream, and I think we only caught the tail end of it. Apparently they smoked Mirage on Bank, which is probably why they were very confident when going back to RTV on that map.
I think it was, as far as the SSG Mirage game, I think it was SSG smoked on Bank. We're up 5-1 on defense on Oregon, and then choked it 7-5 if memory serves, and then and then map 3 was a 7-5 slugfest.
Yeah, it was kind of a similar choke on Club if I recall correctly, but they still kept calm and collected, and they still won, so that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And now that they have game day experience against RTV, the one kind of one-up they had against them is now out the window. And we could tell on the desk and just a general talent group that RTV wanting to go back to Border was kind of a very desperate attempt at salvaging winning their match against SSG to then rematch TSM, which was a bloodbath. Bank, they didn't necessarily make a lot of mistakes, but TSM was just using their strengths of having really consistent gunners and knowing where the isolated attackers are going to be in the early round to make it a 5v4 almost every round. And historically speaking, RTV is not strong at winning entry engagements. They'll get into opening gunfights, but winning them is another story. They like to try to equalize in the mid round by looking for trades. Again, Fett probably really gave you a lot of good insight on that. But the problem is doing that against Pro League teams is significantly more difficult than Challenger League teams. I think that just goes without saying. So it really did seem like a lot of rounds they were out of their element because they were almost always on the back foot from the start. And TSM and SSG didn't give them a lot of opportunities to bounce that back, especially on day number 2.
Yeah, I definitely think, like, for RTV in particular, I think even Mr. B himself admitted this, like, when they lost Gavin, they lost that tip of the spear. They lost that entry with that factor of, I gotta get in there, and I'm gonna bash your face in to do it. And so they had to completely revamp how they've attacked.
Exactly.
And it's definitely effective in Challenger League, but I think you're completely right that against Pro League caliber teams does not nearly work as well. I just want to get your thoughts about the way TSM played because, they had a pretty good go of it. They struggled a bit against Mirage, cleaned up RTV pretty well, and then SSG, their first ever 7-0 since the org has joined the scene.
Yeah, that was beyond impressive on Bank because both of those teams are very solid on Bank in particular. I think they played against one another in NAL, and I think that game ended 7-5 in stage number 3 between SSG and TSM. It was a fairly close game. I went and double checked to see if it went to overtime, and it did not, so that's why I remember the 7-5 in particular. But both of them know what to do on Bank, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that SSG quite literally had a game day warm up against RTV on Bank, they were probably a lot more, geared up to go play on Bank again against TSM. And something that Snake had mentioned to me on his Twitch chat, because every now and again I'll go and just, talk to him, see what he's doing, see how the FBL queue's going.
Yeah.
He talked about it. One example was their heroic match in the Yongshipping Major. A lot of teams over the span of stages, they will not change strats too frequently on a lot of maps. So Heroic, for example, did a bunch of bookwork on how TSM likes to play on Clubhouse, so they knew what to do and how exactly to counter strat against every single plan that TSM would theoretically bring out on game day. So they hastily won that match. And I could imagine SSG probably did the same thing. They've got great staffing behind them. They're all veterans of the game. Yeah, I mean, they knew what to expect going in the Bank, and they quite literally just played that map like hours ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if my feed just like died there for a
second. Froze for a little bit, but like the audio came in clean. Yeah.
That's good. So
with all that, now we have SSG 100% through to the 6th Invitational. Do you think they're going to go far? Because I definitely think, they're strong. They definitely have that international experience, and I think they're more of a LAN team than a regional team, if that makes sense. They play better internationally against the international teams. Do you think they're a contender to make a deep run here?
I'd say so. Again, they've got a lot of good experience playing internationally, so they know how to adapt when they need to. And they're probably one of the stronger looking teams going into SI for North America because how many changes have happened with other teams. Sonics is a good example. They have made changes, but in my opinion, not a lot of major changes besides the Citizen pickup, who he's a solid player. So I'm sure that's not going to be too big of an issue. And Citizen also has a lot of just, international experience since G2 has qualified for a good chunk of majors. So they're probably one of the stronger looking teams going into SI for North America. Astralis and Dark Zero, for example, having Gavin and Spiff both playing in the biggest stage they have ever seen or ever competed in, period, that could maybe put on a lot of pressure for them. That might have a bit of, underperformance issues, but they're both good players. So if they're able to, just keep it pretty calm and concise, then we could still see Astralis and Dark Zero do well. But overall, I think SSG having all their, I've mentioned this several times now, but having all these veteran players who have all been top tier at one point during an SI run, Sonics with Yeti, they were top 6. I think several players that are on SSG, not obviously just winning them, but still not winning SI, but also just getting at the top of SI in particular. I mean, it's going to go a long way.
Okay, cool. And so What about backtracking a little bit? I want to talk about that collegiate
Mhm.
LAN you went to because I don't think it's an understatement to say this is like the fourth or fifth LAN event in the entire like Siege calendar, especially
Yeah.
for like NA. Because even if you count the NAL, what that's 3 LAN stages, and this is the first one
Yep.
for like T2. What was it like having that LAN experience?
It's always fun. I've done LAN events, a handful of times for collegiate leagues because they're usually the ones who have just random amounts of money they can just dump into LANs and make it somewhat viable because collegiate will pay a lot of money to have events like that hosted. Like it costs like thousands of dollars to get your team signed up for a LAN event like that. Even there was one I did for a group called NACE, and that one was also backed in a venue that is run by NSG. They had their venue over in Philadelphia called
Oh
The
yeah, yeah,
Block.
yeah.
So, again, a lot of money can go into this stuff because Collegiate just has that kind of backing. But to go a little bit back on track, it's always fun and unique being in a LAN environment because doing remote broadcasting, it has its own pros and cons. Like a big pro is just the convenience, you can work from home, but a big con is not having that same experience with your co-commentator. It makes it a lot more challenging to have a genuine conversation from them most of the time. But in LAN, you can do hand signals, you can tap them on the shoulder, you can point stuff out to them. You can be on the same wavelength at a much easier rate compared to, doing remote commentary, which especially when doing something like SI close calls where you're casting pro league teams or teams that are just on the cusp of being pro league, where you have to be on your A game, doing that in an in-person studio can be significantly easier at points compared to remote, but also LAN events can have their own issues like ISPs, which has, on record done a lot of trolling for specific LAN events. I think SI Close Calls last year had a major issue with that. Um, the collegiate event I did a year ago in South Bend, we had an ISP issue as well on one day. So all the computers were to shut down for like several hours, which really put us behind schedule on one of the more important days.
Yeah.
So everything you want to take into account is going to have its pros and cons, but doing a LAN is almost always fun.
Do you have to change up the way that you cast? Because I know something that's mentioned by legacy casters like Semler is when casting in LAN, when casting in arenas, which I know obviously collegiate event, not in the Spodek or anything, but do you
Right.
have to change the way that you're casting so as to not reveal information to players that are in the same building or same room as you?
Um, Usually you take that into consideration. So if it's the teams that you're broadcasting, you're going to try to put them as far away from the commentary booth as possible,
Okay.
especially if you do what like we ended up having for most of the days at the Columbus LAN, which was having us visible to all the, contenders in the venue instead of putting us in like a little booth in the background, which
Oh,
we ended up
interesting.
doing for grand finals. But for the regular play days, we were like just feet away from some of the players that were actually, in matches. Sometimes that could affect them. They could sometimes hear us through the headsets if we got really loud for a play-by-play moment. But for the most part, it tends to not coincide with
Okay.
players and then commentators when we're both trying to do our thing. Um, Especially when you have the people that you're casting basically across the venue as far away from you as possible. Um, in major arenas, some of that hype is going to follow up with what you're casting because you have the audience now to kind of help do your job as well. They're really great suspense builders, and they're also really good at having that high end hype that you almost always want to look for with a beautiful play.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know because I know that's something I've always been curious about. Just how to adjust your casting, but I kind of want to know about the position of collegiate siege because it's kind of seen where the Canadian Pro League was when the NAL first launched, where it's like T1.5 and collegiate's kind of
Hmm.
like T3.5 or like 3B to the 3A
Yeah.
of like tier 3. Where does like collegiate place in the competitive circuit?
So, for simplicity's sake, at least for me, I tend to call collegiate just like T4 because it's its own thing. T4 is usually what I describe as like most collegiate leagues, and then you also have like beginning leagues as well. But some people don't prefer doing that, and they like to kind of bundle everything as tier 3, or like you said, tier 3.5 for collegiate specifically, or just have it as its own thing. That's also completely fair. Everyone still kind of knows what we're all talking about. But the reason why collegiate is usually put in a different variety as just regular T3s for a couple of reasons. One, you have the limitations of collegiate. They don't really like outsiders. And also the level of competition is very different from collegiate compared to T3, because you're going to have way more teams that are playing inside of collegiate compared to just regular T3. Like I think it was 64 teams ended up, like playing in the qualifiers roughly, maybe even
Jeez.
less than that for SFCL. I really can't remember off the top of my head. It might be
Yeah,
way
yeah.
less than that off the bat, but for collegiate, even if you have like that same number, it's not just like qualifiers. You're going to have several different divisions, so everyone can play, because their organization, like I mentioned with the land, for example, they're all paying for their teams to like play in these leagues and have competition. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's kind of like NCAA, but it's like every division can have a team that plays. It's kind of the same
Yeah, you
aspect of
get your
that, except
game
they just
day
call it different.
reps.
Exactly. So, uh, it's just you get way more teams. Some are good, some suck. That's just kind of how it is. That's how it is with regular sports as well. So, you just get way more teams that play, and then you'll see examples like I think it was, what was it, OSU? Yeah, they were the ones that were collegiate connoisseurs for
Yeah.
SCS. You will see on occasion players that are actually pretty good at the game, either mechanically or they just have a very good understanding of how the game just works in general. So you get somebody like Wacko, where he just drops 16 every game, and it's like, yeah, well, of course they're going to win. They have a very consistent gunner who knows how to play in this environment, which the collegiate scene compared to T3 is also a very different environment because of all the different little cogs that turn inside of the collegiate scene compared to just T3.
I was gonna ask about collegiate connoisseurs and SCS because I think it was a really good litmus test of like how
Mm-hmm.
collegiate kind of ranks against the rest of the scene. Do you think that collegiate pipeline has any potential in the future, or is this kind of like where it's going to be, where it's like kind of T3 and it can be at the edge of T2, but those players are going to have to take the leap at some point?
Yeah, so the way it is right now, collegiate, with having a very wide, broad amount of people that play in it, it can have a very bad stigma with like players in collegiate just not being as good compared to regular amateur players, which, that's fair. But you're still going to get on the occasion players that are actually very good at the game and can hold their own in T3. I know, Ice Cold for a good point of time was trying to contend in T3 for a while. He was like on and off with being like a super sub for certain teams, or just flat out being on a team in general that would, be close to qualifying for something like SFCL, for example. I think he was on NSO, which was a team that made it pretty far in that qualifier run. Um, so in general, it's still kind of a rougher stigma around collegiate, but I have said this for a while. I even got like backlash for it like
Really?
forever ago, back in like SFCL season 3. Yeah, some guy was like on Twitter being like, no way someone on a broadcast said that this collegiate team could be at the top of T3. I don't really remember the full details, and I mean, it kind of was fair, but this was
Yeah.
like a year ago or whatever. But the top T3 or top collegiate teams, pardon, could contend in T3 at a fairly feasible level. I think not only Collegiate Connoisseurs is a good example of that, but also Hong Kong Rebels, because one of their main players, Rai Rai, also donned from Collegiate, and his team wasn't even like the best team in Collegiate. He was just a top 4, sometimes top 2 team. They won like the Purdue Invitational, which was in South Bend, Indiana,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was really the last event they had actually won. They would always be like the runner-ups for
Oh.
winning like CR6 stage, 1 season 7, or like the next LAN they ended up doing. Funny enough, they lost to OSU in the Columbus Invitational, which that was reversed about a year ago. NC State clobbered OSU like a year ago. So it was kind of a, bittersweet revenge. And it was kind of like changing the guard almost, because now OSU is that top collegiate team. And they're also fairly decent in T3, because the T3 teams they played against, like Eclectic, they did very well against them. That staved them off of relegation. So, the stigma's kind of dying, but it's still definitely there.
Okay, cool. And let's see how much time. Just at 20 minutes. I guess the last place I'll end this on is expectations for the Sixth Invitational, because I know that's like the big thing. It's 11 days away or whatever, or whenever this interview comes out. What are your expectations for the event? Like, just who's gonna win it? What region's gonna profit the most? Any 03ers or 05ers or whatever?
So I can go look at the actual group stage now because I think they're still waiting on the European qualifier. That's this weekend. But I'd have to say, despite LATAM not, technically winning anything yet, teams like W7M that have shown like constant improvement throughout the year definitely have a good chance of winning SI. I think a lot of LATAM teams going into this look solid. A couple of EU teams, we saw BDS have a wonderful performance just last major. The Wolves have always been pretty consistent. So again, a lot of good runner-ups that could win SI, and you could give a feasible argument. Except for I don't know. I would suppose maybe APAC, because they've had a very rough year as a whole. They've had a lot of short fallings even when they qual for majors. It doesn't really go their way, which kind of sucks. But you're gonna have years like that. I remember NA back in, what was it, like 2021, right after they won SI, they had a really rough time against LATAM, and that was a very dominant year for LATAM as a whole. And even the year after that, they still held on pretty well, and they still look good going into 2023. So despite LATAM not winning anything technically, I think they're not going to be a dark horse, but they're going to be very scary.
All right, cool. And last thing, anything you want to close out with? Anyone you want to shout out?
I mean, I guess the talent crew I've been working with for a long time now, not just the people in CL who I obviously just finished up with a week ago for SI Closed Calls, but all the people I got to work with at the Columbus Invitational. It's always good seeing those guys in person, because a lot of them are like my actual friends who I met before I got really involved in casting, but I still either work with on the rare occasion or just hang out with outside of work. My Twitter ad is @FellowTheCaster. You can follow that if you want. I think I said the quote, "I'm not your dad, so you don't really have to listen to me." I'll say that once again. And yeah, that's mostly it. Just a lot of the people who I've worked with and who have given me opportunities to keep working, so I can end up meeting people like you and doing small interviews like that, because these are always pretty fun. I'd like to say it's interesting having someone ask you questions just kind of not off the rip, because I know you're like having all these notes jotted down in preparation for this, but like getting to see what I'm going to say about some of these potential questions. It's always interesting. I didn't even think you would bring up the Columbus Invitational, because not many people that are outside of the collegiate scene really knew that was happening, but I'm glad it got a little bit of traction outside of just collegiate.